We all belong outside. We're drawn to nature, whether it's the recorded sounds of the ocean we doze off to, or the succulents that adorn our homes. Nature makes all of our lives, well, better. Despite all this, we often go about our busy lives removed from it. But the outdoors is closer than we realize. With All Trails, you can discover trails nearby and explore confidently. With offline maps and on-trail navigation, download the free app today and make the most of your summer with All Trails. We all belong outside. We're drawn to nature, whether it's the recorded sounds of the ocean we doze off to, or the succulents that adorn our homes. Nature makes all of our lives, well, better. Despite all this, we often go about our busy lives removed from it. But the outdoors is closer than we realize. With All Trails, you can discover trails nearby and explore confidently. With offline maps and on-trail navigation, download the free app today and make the most of your summer with All Trails.
Welcome to the Cardiff Central Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cardiff Central Podcast. As you can tell, with me being back in the hot seat, we're taking a break from our summer special series of guests. But I am joined by both Dan and Carwyn. How are you doing, gentlemen?
All good.
I'll let Dan go first because my video is going way behind me.
Yeah, all good here. Enjoying the one day of summer. And now that the rugby's come to an end, pretty much don't have to watch another weekend of Wales making it quite miserable in between two quite good test matches.
Yeah.
I mean, I the most I watched of the game was 20 minutes in the amusement part of Butlins Minehead, so it's probably a slightly better way of experiencing it than others. But we'll get onto that later. First of all, let's go through some news. So, over the last couple of weeks, Cardiff has signed Josh McNally from Bath, veteran lock, exactly the sort of Balkan grunt that we've been crying out for years. So, good signing, gents.
Very much so, I think, personally.
Yeah, I agree. I think from a player perspective, he's big, which is always a plus in a Cardiff pack. But he's as he's coming towards sort of the latter part of his career, he's become a full-on sort of tight head lock. He was maybe a bit of a 4 and a 6 earlier in his career, but yeah, he's very up and down now. He's going to give us a bit of an edge in there, physicality-wise. Good line out forward as well, but beyond that, then it's a bit back to what Jockey said when he come on our pod towards the back end of the season about looking for good people to fit in. You know, he's been Bath captain, he's got loads of experience, he's a sergeant in the RAF, so he brings that sort of level of discipline and good communication to his game as well, which I think would be massive off the field. And obviously, lock is not somewhere we're particularly blessed at depth-wise at the moment, but I think he'd be great for somebody like Teddy as well to bounce off as he comes through, and a couple of the other young forwards from around the pack generally. So yeah, can't fault that piece of business, I don't think.
Yeah, the leadership bit is the bit that stands out for me. You know, I think he's captained Bath 2 times, isn't he? And you look at that squad now, you're probably looking at Belcher as the one standout leader. Sort of captain leader, really. Ben Thomas, I know, has done a fair bit of it this season, but he's still a young guy learning his position, or youngish guy, positions as well. But then you talk about Ray Lilo is probably the only other leader in that camp or experienced guy, so it's good to get someone else in there who can marshal the troops, pardon the pun, and get the ducks in order and help things out there. So I think he's a very good signing for Cardiff going forward.
Yeah, I think we're all agreed. So Dan, you just wanted to confirm something that was mentioned offhand by Dickie in the great interview you two did the other week.
Yeah, so Dickie mentioned that it hasn't. The club still haven't put it out yet, so I don't know if they're forgot about it or what. But Darren Allinson's come in as head of recruitment, former Cardiff scrum half, played a bit in 2005, 2007, somewhere around there. He played for us. He went on to play for London Irish, I think, quite a bit he was. but since retiring in 2019, he's worked as an agent for 4 or 5 years now and comes in as our head of recruitment. So good world to bring somebody in from in that role, knows how to work the agents and what they're after. Good contacts, I'm sure, globally as well from that time in his career. So I think takes a bit of stress away from Jockey, allows him to concentrate a bit more on the rugby, and puts a rugby person in charge of recruitment as well. Sometimes I think there's been some accusations leveled that it comes a bit too much from top level at the club who aren't so rugby focused people. So yeah, I think that's a smart pickup and another good spend of new money from the owners as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then next bit of Cardiff news is the Challenge Cup fixtures have been released, which sees us starting off with an away trip to Lyon before hosting Toyota Cheetahs before Christmas. And then after the festive derbies, we're away to Perpignan and then host Connacht Rugby in a URC clash, which I've made no secret. Connacht at home is one of my favourite fixtures, usually because it's a belting game, although admittedly last season's was a buck in that trend. Before I get your thoughts, I just want to ask one question. Why don't French teams want to come to Cardiff anymore? Because I'm pretty sure this is 3 seasons in a row now where we haven't had a home fixture against a French side.
Yeah, I don't actually know what that is about. But it's 2 decent trips. I think the headline for a lot of people is going to be no Amsterdam, because that's what everybody wanted, to go to Amsterdam to play the Cheetahs. But I did Lyon. I've done Lyon twice, I think, and that's a really good trip down there. Good city, good ground as well. Put a good match day on. Not done Perpignan. Unfortunately, I think circumstances will prevent me doing that this year. But that would have been a really good trip, and I think quite a lot of people have been exploring weird and wonderful ways to get down there.
Yeah, it's I think Perpignan, great trip. I still can't get over the fact you've got the draw and then you don't know who you're playing. I just like, honestly, it frustrates me so much. Because when you're working it, you're writing these groups and you're writing, this team, this team, this team, and then the group they may play, and it's like, well, it's such a difficult concept. But and frankly, I really wish they went back to the old concept, but that's by the by. Moving on. I think, yeah, some lovely trips there, Lyon and Perpignan, and yeah, like you say, Connacht is always a stonking game in Cardiff. Normally a card or injuries or something going on for Cardiff though, so hopefully everyone stays fit on the park and healthy for that one, and it could be a good game at Cap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe, I think Cheetahs would be an interesting one because I think we're about 50-50 against them from their time in the Pro 14. Any other news that people want to bring attention to?
No. Oh, I will mention briefly the Bristol game at the Millennium Stadium. I don't think the club are happy. I think, let's put it that way, that it wasn't mentioned at the BRB. Obviously, it probably affects us slightly more than the other pro sides, who equally are not happy as well that it wasn't brought up. It should be added. But yeah, with it being right next door, it's just, Dickie was only on a couple of weeks ago saying how good the relationship was now and it's improved and all this sort of stuff. And Abby Tierney herself was doing the media rounds after that sort of strategy that wasn't really a strategy was pushed out, and yeah, saying, it's all about working together and collaboration and stuff, and then they go and book Bristol playing a game right on our doorstep. I mean, I know there's been some debate about whether it's actually an issue or not. I'm not going to get into that now, but I think everybody can agree that the simple fact that they didn't even bother telling the club, and the first that everyone else heard about it was when it was announced, is just, I don't know, it's mind-boggling, really.
It's very much, we didn't ask you because we knew you'd say no, but we really wanted to do it this time. Yeah, can you remember which weekend it is as well? Was it
it's Saturday the 10th of May? So it's the first weekend that we're in South Africa at the end of next season.
Yeah. So I mean, you could argue it's a good way to get some Welsh fans in watching live rugby, because after all, based on the things I see on Twitter, if one English team in Wales is a good thing. And then 2 English teams must be twice as good. We'll get twice as many people into it.
I
And you know,
think
everyone keeps telling me that they're going to go support Gloucester and Bristol all the time anyway. So you know,
I
now
think
they don't even have to travel.
I think that's the concern. Yeah, there is an angle that it brings money in, and you know, it kind of might, I don't know, in some weird way boost Welsh rugby. If you go in and watch a game at the Millennium Stadium, you might fancy going to watch another Welsh game. But the other aspect of it is that it's inviting what could be seen as a competitor into our own backyard to steal fans away. They're not going to steal week in, week out fans, but there's a lot of in South Wales of sort of floating voters, if you like, and Bristol is not that far away. You know, at the end, you know, my parents both work in Bristol, live in Cardiff. They go back and forth every day, and people will travel. You know, I drive back and forth to Cardiff. Harley, you travel a long way to go and watch Cardiff games as well. You know, people will go if they want to. They don't have to go every week, but Ashton Gate's a pretty good match day, and Bristol have some great
Great park and
fixtures.
ride.
Yeah, so
Park
it's
and
only
ride to Ashton Gate's pretty good.
on a Saturday afternoon. You can get the train from Cardiff into Temple Meads and get a bus up to the ground, and it's quite a good day out. And so, yeah, Bristol in their press bump thing related to it were very specifically clear that they're here to engage new audiences. So, yeah, I'm not sure the wisdom of that on the WIU's part, other than a money grab, really.
But it's not.
Anything?
Sorry, it's not though, is it? Like there's no other reason bar money than money, and you just have to look at the financial situation WIU are in. It's not, you know, there's no. They're not keen to expand the game. It's nothing to do with, you know, we're not talking about Fiji coming down here. We're talking about, or I don't know, Romania or Turkey or whoever. You know, we're talking about Bristol Bears are an established club. It's just a money grab. It's an attempt to get money in, and like the hole they're in, they're looking at money from anywhere. And there's 2 ways to look at it, I suppose. And you can look at it from that aspect, which I assume all the regions are going to look at, and you're trying to compete with that. And Cardiff are in South Africa, which is bizarre. You know, you just, someone said earlier, you know, imagine a situation 5 years ago where Cardiff are playing a club game in South Africa, and then Bristol are playing in the Millennium Stadium or Principality Stadium. That's bizarre to think about. But on the flip side, if looking forward, this is something that happens more regularly. Say they get 4 or 5 games, and say they raise 2.5 million hypothetically from those games. I don't know the figures. No one knows the figures as far as I know, or have been told. But hypothetically, you raise 2.5 million from those. That does go a little bit way to solve that funding deficit and that funding gap that they're looking at. And if that helps to save a region, or maybe not save, but help find a funding model that suits all 4 regions or 3 regions, I can see where they're going for it, and there is benefit in the long term. I think it's not an ideal situation, but I don't think we live in that ideal world at the moment. So I think needs must to some extent.
And then sort of a hot off the presses thing is BBC have announced that Scrum 5, what specifically the Sunday show, is moving to iPlayer only. And that'll be fronted up by Lauren Jenkins. Yeah, so they're still going to cover live URC games. So whichever games they get on this Saturday, their Friday night, that'll still be live on BBC Two. But the sort of Scrum 5 Sunday, the highlight show, and non-live games that they show, that'll all be on iPlayer only. Which is just sort of, you know, they say it's just their way of cutting cloth and trying to save money. Colin is a former BBC freelancer. Any thoughts on that one that you're willing to share, or are you still hoping for a work with them? You keep quiet.
I was very subtly looking away from the camera, trying to avoid that answer.
Why do you think I picked on you?
Yeah, as someone who's freelance for the BBC, it's sad, I think, is the first and foremost thought. I know a lot of people who work on that show, and a lot of time goes into a lot of things that go on to the show. You know, you talk about certain aspects that have been on that for decades. When, you know, I know everyone has their detractors and everyone has their critics, but I grew up watching that week in, week out since I've been watching rugby, to be honest. I can't, to be honest, I do remember it being a Swan, having an analysis of a Swansea game back in whatever that would have been, 2002, 2003. So that's basically been my childhood and livelihood of rugby, is watching Scrum 5 after a weekend of seeing some of the games. I think it is a sad reflection of where we are. It is a sad reflection of the cost cutting. As far as it being a cost cutting mechanism, I'm not 100% sure. It might just be a simple thing of the viewership isn't enough. I don't know the numbers. I haven't had this discussion, to be honest. But I'm just saying that it might not be as much about cost cutting as if they've got to focus on what brings viewers in, and maybe it doesn't deserve that prime time slot anymore. Which is a sad reflection of perhaps where the game is in Wales, perhaps where focus has gone in Wales. But I've got utmost respect for the people who work on that show, the behind the scenes, and Lauren obviously herself. I think she's a brilliant host and has done some brilliant interviews on that going forward. So yeah, it's I to be honest, and this isn't me sitting on the fence. I think it is a sad reflection of where it is at the moment, but I'm not surprised either. I think is a probably an accurate depiction of where I'm at the moment.
Yep. Anything you want to add there, Dan?
Nope, not really. I think because I'm cool and down with the kids with a V on the end. I watch everything on iPlayer, so it's basically no change for me.
Well, based in England, so the only way I can watch it is, and same with the when Scrum 5 do the live games, is on iPlayer, and I'm constantly infuriated because it's like 10 seconds behind. And Yestin from the Ospreys and Welsh pod is just saying like, "Oh, check this out." I was like, "Oh, I've not seen." Yeah, there it is. Unless I put it up, that's a BT box issue, not an iPlayer issue. Should have. They just seem to have a really bad latency. Anyway, so moving on. So obviously no games for Cardiff, although they did officially confirm the two preseason friendlies against Ealing Trailfinders and Bath that we found out about thanks to Seb. But the boys have been back in action. We have seen some fantastic photos of them running up a bit of sand and pumping some iron, and some fantastic thirst pits of Gabe the Guns Hamer Webb. So is that everyone starting to get in the mood of it, ready for the next season, or does it feel like we've barely finished the last one?
Well, we haven't. We haven't finished the last one. We're still going.
We finished this season.
I can't believe they're back already. It's a bit mad, to be fair. But yeah, I think pictures are looking solid. My player notes: Gabe Hamer-Webb is fit in all senses of the word, and I definitely would if he's up for it. I thought Joe Cowell looks like a bit of a beast in the photos so far. The Cardiff Met tight head. Danny Southworth, the new loose head from Exeter, just looks large. Looks like a very large man. What else did I make a note of? Dan Thomas's long hair is looking good. Enjoying his hair. And then also there was the mention. So we've got we'll come on to this. We've got no nines in the squad, obviously, because Bevan's away. So they've got in training with them a lad called Reese Price, who's been on some of the photos, and having done some quick digging on him, he is from sort of Merthyr Aberdare, top of the valleys way. Played with us 16s and 17s. Went to Hartbury, which is where the link with Johnny Goodridge, who's now come in as skills coaches, when he was at Hartbury. He's been playing for. He's played a couple of times in the English Championship for Hartbury seniors last season, and he's most recently been playing for Box Hill RFC, which is a club in Melbourne, and they play in the Jewish Shield, which I feel like they're copying the name a bit, but maybe we've copied them. I don't know, but which is the sort of Melbourne equivalent of the same competition that Jamie Hill's gone to play in Sydney. That sort of top of the domestic tier in regional Australia, but now he's back and spending a few weeks with us in pre-season by the looks.
That sounds good. Hopefully he's going to think. Other promising news is seeing photos of Talupi Falato out and about, and Thomas Young as well, looking like. So hopefully that means that they're both on track for having a part to play at least in the start of the season. Especially with that Big Mac being away with Wales, looks like he's going to be away with Wales for the foreseeable.
Well, my other preseason note, actually, just to finish on, is that it's great to see Gwilym Bradley back as well. He looked in pretty good nick, but yeah, just great to see him back training after. Well, it's going to be a long old time if he plays in preseason. It'll be close on 2 years, I think, since he last played.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's be honest. When I remember putting a post out saying about how he needed a 7, and then someone went, "What about Gwyn Bradley?" And I'll be shamefully, I forgot. I forgot about him because it's been just that long. I wasn't even sure he was still in the squad. I thought he'd be moved on to the side in the race. I think. Shall we discuss the elephants in the room then? Actually, no, we'll ignore that. Shall we talk about the Cymru under-20s boys and the Wales women before we go on to the real horrible elephant? So Wales women have won a game by a margin, which is quite good, against Spain. Did either of you two catch the game?
Yeah, I was there. It was squeaky bum time end of first half. So many errors in the first half. There will be a lot of positives in this, but first half, lots of errors, lots of mistakes. And I think there were a couple of missed tackles in the backfield and things that we've seen in the Six Nations. But then second half, to be fair to them, whatever that rocket that they were given in the halftime messages, it was clear, concise. Plans were they had a dominant forward pack that were literally scrummaging Spain off their own ball. Dominant maul, as you'd expect. Front five were carrying well. And then they managed to get a bit of nice play in the backs. I thought Jenny Hesketh, best performance we've seen from her in a Wales shirt so far. I thought she was very good, particularly in the second half when things opened up. She looked assured, looked composed. A couple of others, Karen Lake, and it was her 50th cap, and she was carrying really well. Fair play to her. She looked desperate for a try, unfortunately, didn't manage to get it. And yeah, back three, I thought there was a real good balance in there in general. When you talk about Karis Cox scoring a hat trick, I thought I really do like Lisa Neumann as an option because I think her size and ball carrying ability allows her to come off the wing a lot better. And then you add in that back row, which is just, it is beautiful. Like, honestly, it is one hell of a back row with Butcher's Calendar, Beth Lewis, and then you've got the small matter, or rather not so small matter, Gwennan Hopkins to come off the bench. And, you're doing all that while shoving Georgia Evans into the second row because you can. It's a really great team that performed well, particularly in the second half. And if that's the level we've got going forward into WXV2, I'm really excited because that's 2 wins on the bounce. That's progress. You can see players individually progressing. Jenny Hesketh, for instance, as we mentioned, or I mentioned, and then you look at some other players coming forward as well, going into the future. It's going to be really exciting, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything around there, Dan?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Karen said there. I think my only slight caveat I would slightly add is that I thought Spain fell off a cliff fitness-wise second half. I thought the difference between a program that's been professional for a while and I can't profess to be an expert on Spanish women's rugby, but I'm going to stick my neck out and suggest they're probably not professionals. The difference between the pro S&C and the amateur / semi-pro S&C told a bit there second half, especially in what was actually quite a sunny day in Cardiff. But Cymru just needed a win. Just needed a win, and it was a real good confidence booster going into WXV2. I think they'll be in a much better position going into that than they were going into WXV1, weirdly, last season, despite having done quite well in the Six Nations. But yeah, I think because they'll have a bit of a chip on their shoulders still from the Six Nations, keen to prove a point, but a little bit of confidence from that win as well. So hopefully it's a nice balance. I think they've got, is it 2 friendlies they've announced before WXV2 as well?
So I was going to get onto it. So obviously that winning that game not only qualifies Wales women for the 2025 World Cup in England, but it also means that they are now in WXV2, which is probably the right level for them, really. So there's two sort of pre fixtures. So the second of which is at Dave Parade on the 20th of September, and then the week before, unfortunately I can't remember off the top of my head if it's the Friday or the Saturday night. They are at the Hive Stadium playing Scotland women, and then the Dave Parade when they're playing Australia, which I think is a weird pair of opponents, since one of whom will be playing. Australia will be playing 8 days later in South Africa. So maybe they're hoping that Australia women will be very knackered after travelling before going down.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought
moving on.
about that. That is actually really weird, isn't it?
And then Scotland, who they play every year anyway.
Yeah.
Like you thought the point of this was to get more thing. Anyway, so going on to our opponent. So as I've alluded to, we play the Wallaroos on the 28th of September. So that'll be a Saturday, and then our next two games are both on Friday. So we play Italy, another team we play every year, which again found weird that they ended up in the opposite group. Normally they kept the Six Nations on one side and everyone else. Anyway, and then we finally finish up against the Sakura 15, which is the Japanese women's team, on the 11th of October for final. And then I think everyone gets a fourth game, but that it's sort of like first, second, third, first, and the selected pools. For the chance to win. I think
it's that first game, isn't it? Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
That first game's tough, but I feel like for Wales to show they've progressed and to make up for the Six Nations, it's got to be at least getting into that final for WXV2. I think they've got to be in that first place playoff for me. But I don't see it happening because I do think the Wallaroos are probably a little bit better. I can see Wallaroos being the top of their sort of half of the WXV.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to see that when you think that Wales lost to the Wallaroos when the Wallaroos were down to, was it 13 for 20 minutes and 14 for pretty much 60 last year, and I would have thought Wales aren't quite to that level that they were at the end of last year at the moment. As I said, we've seen 2 wins on the bounce. We'll see how we progress going towards the latter part of the year. But Wallaroos definitely have improved as well. They've had some good wins under their belts, but it is very much all on that game. I think it was all on that game in WXV1 last year as well. It's quite bizarre that the two teams meet again and in such a crucial game, because Wales aren't going to lose to Japan. I've got to be honest. Wales are a better side than Japan and should beat Japan. And if they don't, then serious questions should be asked. Italy's always going to be a nip and tuck game. It always has been, always will be, by the sounds of things, sadly. Be great to beat them by 50 points, but it's not going to happen. And then the Wallaroos are just, I agree with Harley. I think it'd be a great scalp if Wales get the win. And I don't think it's out of the question. Wales should have won last year. And I think Eleanor Snowsill said that they should have won last year. But at the moment, I think it's a stretch, which is, so you may be looking at third, and therefore is the best option if you think of how the groups are going to work out. So you play across, but so I think it is third most likely, and that would be a good tournament, and then anything plus that would be a bonus.
I mean, it could be quite interesting because obviously the third team in our sort of set of 3, so because WXV needs to be unbelievably complicated. You have 6 teams in each division, and then they're split into 2 pools, A and B, 3 teams in each, and then you play the teams in the other pool. So obviously we don't play Scotland or South Africa, so I think that could actually be that half could be very tight, particularly with Scotland. So I think Wales are going to be looking at trying to beat, at least with the Japan and the Italy games, trying to beat those teams by more than Scotland do, and then hoping maybe for a result against the Wallaroos. But it should be interesting. Some good rugby.
Still gonna be tough though. Scotland are a good side now.
Yeah, they're a very good side. They've got rid of their perennial Scottish issue of not being able to convert pressure into points, and that is thing. And and that's sort of makes them a bit terrifying there.
But if they got if they convert all their passion from Rachel Malcolm, they'll be incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that is one thing that we have some fantastic players, but we don't. One thing I was surprised at is, despite the fact she is effectively the captain because every referee treats her such, how come Alex Callender still hasn't been officially called the Wales captain yet? But I'm not. I won't go into that. Go into that debate. That's one for the rap women's pod, I think.
I think an interesting point on that. I remember putting a tweet out when I interviewed Gwennon Hopkins and said, Gwennon Hopkins is going to be the next Wales, she'll be a Wales captain of the future. And someone immediately said, yeah, straight right after Alex Callender. I think if Alex Callender isn't the next Wales captain, something weird has gone on. She is vice captain. As you pointed out, referees do treat her as captain and tell her to look after her own captain. As was the case with Wales, Italy. But yeah, look, Hannah does some brilliant stuff as captain, and I think when Hannah came in as captain, she was the right choice. Whether Hannah stays as captain is probably another question longer term, but I think she's done a brilliant job in stabilising the situation, considering all that was going on at the time with the misogyny, sexism. I think she has spoken really well about those situations and done really well in supporting the captaincy off the field. And maybe, looking on going forward, we'll see what happens.
Right, last word for Wales women. Good on to Dan. And Dan, do you want to then kick off the under-20s discussions?
Yeah, nothing more to add. I think you covered the women quite well there, to be fair. Probably pick it up a bit more ahead of WXV time. But 20s wise, it's been a good tournament for the boys, I think, actually. I think they might be a little bit disappointed results wise. But the context to the 20s, I think, is always that they use the Six Nations as more of a development few weeks to get the boys into camp, to have a look at them all. I think Whiffin used like over 30 players during the under-20 Six Nations. There was some injury element to that, but he properly rotated and had a look at everyone, gave everyone an opportunity. And then after they've had a good camp going into the World Championship in the summer, then that's when they try and compete. And they pushed New Zealand all the way in the first game, comfortable enough win over Spain in the second game, pushed France. I don't know if pushed France, but battled hard against France is probably how I would describe the second half there. And then coming up against Australia in the first lot of playoff games, I think they'll be disappointed they didn't get a win there. I think it's kind of similar-ish to the senior game, which we'll get onto a bit, but they let Australia in quite easily once or twice, and but largely played some of the better rugby on the day. But it's always going to be the case. It's actually going to be tough for us now to compete at under-20s level, where player pool wise, resource wise, obviously it dilutes a bit at senior level where there's a bigger pool to pick from, but at 20s level, you are very restricted on who you can pick, and you're relying on particularly producing some big front five forwards, which we don't always have. But there's a lot to like individually from this team. I think there's been some really cracking performances. From a Cardiff perspective to start with, I think Steph Emmanuel's been really impressive, stepping up 18 still, 17 still at the start of the tournament. Coming in, usurping the starting midfield to start at 12 and against France, looks really confident with an all-round game, kicking, carrying, tackling, chucked a few jackals in as well, as every Cardiff player should. Lucas De La Rua hasn't had a full-on chance to show off his skills. I think the back row it's been good individually, but hasn't fully clicked as a unit necessarily. With Woodman and Morse there, I think they're all such dominant individual players. They haven't quite figured out the nuances of how to work as a team fully necessarily. But De La Rua has shown plenty of his quality. I think Matty Young's looked really composed at full back. It's a shame to lose Hugh Anderson from the Dragons after the first game, but Young's come in, good kick coverage, hits the line really well. They've used him in some interesting sets, kind of coming short off 9 and 10 in particular. And then Cody Stone has been a really interesting one on the wing as well. Kind of Tom James-esque with the way he runs and his scrum cap and his pace and finishing. So he's been a good player to watch as well. And then Harry Wild has been up and down at fly half. I think I would describe him as. I think he sees the game really well. It's just about decision making for him. I think at key moments doesn't always make the right decision, despite. I think, yeah. Sorry, just going back on my own point there. Then it's decision making and execution. When he sees it, he doesn't always execute and doesn't always see it at the same time. But he's got the disadvantage of quite a few injuries over the last 12 months. Got injured at the start of the season, missed a load of rugby with the Rags, then got injured at the end of the Six Nations and missed a load of the training camp ahead of the 20s. So I think for him, coming out of the 20s now, he needs an injury-free run with the Rags this season in Super Rugby Cymru, where he'll nail down the 10 shirt, hopefully, and kick on from there. But overall, loads of talent in the 20s team. Johnny Green at second row is a really good player. Sam Scott at tight head. I think Ian Davis is a really good 9. Louis Hennessy is the standout player at outside centre. Unbelievable talent. Could if he kicks on at Bath, he could realistically play for the national team quite quickly. I think if he gets the game time he probably deserves. And then I mentioned Hugh Anderson. We've only seen a glimpse of him this tournament, but I think he's a good talent at fullback as well.
Needs to change his lid, though, doesn't he? Louis Hennessy needs to.
It's got to be he's lost a dice roll there or something, hasn't he?
Oh, it's horrible. Like having dyed, it's just a bit rich coming from. I dyed my hair blonde at a similar age, but even I think mine looked better, and I genuinely remember coming back to my house and saying, "Mum, I need help here. I'm quite depressed about my hair." But I think, that's the one blemish when you can't. It's not doing too bad, is it? And he's one hell of a talent. Can't agree more. You look at, I know we were looking at a piece today for players who can step up, and he's the first one you think of. Stepping up from 20s to senior rugby seems to be a common thing if you're a centre at the moment. Grady, Eddie James, etc. Well, Dragon centre whose names escaped me all of a sudden.
Harry Ackerman.
Thank you very much. I think Harry Ackerman would have been in the equation had it not been for injury. Would have been in and around the squad. So you look at those lads. I can't see something that Hennessy can't do at the moment. Capable of playing 12 or 13. Great offloads, just great offloads. The interesting thing will be once he steps up, does he still get that time, space, ability to do those offloads? That'll be the key challenge. That's the key challenge for anyone stepping up from under 20s to senior rugby. But as far as a physical specimen who gets you across the game line, but also has the smarts to play that position, geez, he looks the real deal. And then, obviously the other big question is then what happens with Morse going forward. I know, not putting words in Dan's mouth, but I've had a chat with you, Dan, about positionally for him going forward. What is the best thing for him? And you look at his size. Is he that 8 that Gatland's probably going to pick? I look at the profile what Gatland looks like. It's the 6'4" line out option generally. Who's that athletic build? He fulfills the athleticism hands down, but it's whether he fulfills the other criteria, which perhaps he doesn't. And you may be then looking at him moving into 7 further down the line. Position obviously played against Spain and to some great extent, and he is capable of pilfering ball. He is good over the ball and also offers plenty of work rate on and off the ball, to be fair to him. I'd be interested to see what they do with him long term, because you look at that profile, it seems pretty set in Gatland's head. You look at Falatau, Wainwright, Plumtree, there's a common thread there. And let's be honest about it, there's a reason Morgan Morris isn't getting picked in Gatland's head. Whether that's right or wrong, he's got his mindset set of what style of 8 he wants. And there's a lot to be said of having a style of 8 you want. We had Jockey on a few weeks ago talking about his style of player for each position. And if you've got a style of player for a position, it's quite hard to change it.
Yeah, and I think there'll be some chat with Morse about, because I imagine the Ospreys will see him as an 8 and will probably bring him through as an 8 in the short term. I don't actually think that matters though. Ultimately, if you watch the way Morse plays, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the back row clicking or not for the 20s, in defensive phase play, he looks like an open side. If you didn't, I think if you watched the games and you didn't know what shirt number they were, you would suggest that Morse was the open side in that 20s team, whether he's wearing 8 or 7 for them, which is where the whole back row partnership is not quite sticking, because I think they're just getting in each other's way essentially, particularly Morse and De La Rua. I think they're just sort of they're occasionally at the same breakdown, occasionally neither of them are there. They haven't quite worked out the sort of nuances of that in the way that Warburton and Lydiot and Warburton and Tipperick did so well for those years in the national team, and that's to be expected. They don't play together particularly often at this stage of their career, and they're still both very young. But yeah, I think for the Ospreys, then I think it'll look quite similar. That other than where you pack down at the scrum, in open play, it doesn't particularly matter then. So yeah, I don't think there's any danger of him, playing 8 for the Ospreys and that impacting how he goes at 7 for the national team. And I think the way it's going for the national team, you look at the profile of 7 that we're going for now, and you look at Tommy Reffel's perhaps struggles on this tour a bit. We're not a big, powerful physical pack anymore. We don't have Alan Wynne-Jones and Ken Owens and Gethin Jenkins and all these guys in there who can give you real parity. You look at this Australia tour and we're not making dominant tackles. We're on the back foot quite a lot defensively. We're trying to reorganize. And so the 7, if you're going to get over the ball, you're going to need a big physical bloke, because Reffel's, I think, slight problem is he's just the ideal Jackal opportunity is not presenting himself to him, and he's just being blown away by the Australian guys who are on the front foot and stepping into these big attacking breakdowns and just causing all sorts of havoc. So having a Botham, a Jack Morgan, and then a Morgan Morse as your kind of bigger physical, almost like 6.5 kind of guys rather than out and out 7s, is sort of the way Wales seem to be going.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about it, sorry, thinking ahead now, you think of Ospreys and think of that back row. Obviously, this season they played a lot of James Ratty at 6 or Rhys Davis earlier on in the season at 6, because Jack Morgan's basically been, he has played a bit, but he's mostly been injured throughout the season, or Wales duty or injured. So therefore, you'd think Jack Morgan comes back in that 6 jersey, Tips is 7, Morris, Morse, whoever it is at 8. Funnily enough, what was a really good combination in the Six Nations was against Italy, where it was De La Rua, Bedell, Morse. That worked brilliantly. You could have given player of the match to all 3 of them, and I think I argued at the pub afterwards heavily that it should have been Bedell, perhaps to Ivan Friends, who awarded man of the match to Morse. But the situation is, I think it could be interesting going forward what that is done. I think with a lot of these players, that positional chat is very interesting. And when we come to the senior team, that's another interesting one, and one that is slightly worrying me going forward. Well, not worrying, but more causing me consternation and a bit of frustration as well. So I think that's an interesting debate to be had going forward. What is the best position for a number of these players? Ryan Woodman was a second row /6, and now it seems he's got it in his head that he's a 6, and everyone's playing him at 6. And I think at the moment he's better for it, but we may see him move somewhere else later on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you never know these things. Yeah, the one problem for me is if you did want Morgan Morse, as I said, and I know it doesn't necessarily play, but if you wanted him to play in a certain way, it's a very hard back row to get into. That Ospreys back row, there are a lot of good players. When you think you've still got Tipperick, who's looks like he's playing some of the best rugby of his career. Jack Morgan, if you've got a Ratty in there, if not, you've got Harry Deves as well. And then Morgan Morris, who is, after all, the man who would save Welsh rugby, depending on who you listen to.
Don't forget Will Griffiths as well, who, despite his injuries troubles, has always been a big player for Ospreys when he's played.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone who I thought was worthy of a call if it hadn't been for injuries. Yeah, so we'll move on to the senior side then. So we've had two out of 2 defeats against Australia. 2 games potentially we could have won if it hadn't been for mistakes. Big question, because I think it depends who you ask. Can we see what Gatland's trying to do?
No, is the short answer. To me, I, I, I think. Well, I can see what he's trying to do short term. I think there's been an obvious game plan in each game. They've been wildly different, has been the big problem, and they've been different again from what we were trying to do in the Six Nations. So you can see what he's maybe in the first game. Nick Tompkins spoke about it in the week of back to basics and being boring and direct, and yeah, we were definitely boring and trying to be direct in that first test. It was kick heavy. It was trying to be physical on transition. It was trying to be quite direct off first phase and off 9 generally in attack, coming around the corner looking to punch holes. Defensively, it was trying to get off the line quickly and get up in Australia faces. Didn't really work. I did. Yeah, I mean, yes, we were sort of in that first test, but I never felt like we were actually going to win that first test ever. And then second test, I thought there was a real switch in the attacking intention, kept the ball a lot more, played to width a lot more. That Liam Williams try comes after 24 phases, I think the stat is, something like that. We put pressure on them. We pulled Mason Grady inside a lot more. We used decoy runners and pullback passes quite a bit to get to the edge, which was better to see. But yeah, to answer the question, yes, there was like obvious little tactical nuances in each game. What that looks like in the medium term, I've absolutely no idea. I mean, I don't know what he's building towards. The selections are quite different. I think the concern, after Saturday, I was more positive than I was after the first test. But then I'm thinking and looking ahead to the autumn, and I think, but the likelihood is that the team will be totally different again because you've got so many players who'll be back available or back fit. How do you ever build if you don't have consistency in selection? The likelihood is that with the inconsistency in selection brings inconsistency in tactics as well. I'm not really sure where he's trying to get to, and yeah, it's so Saturday was better. We could have won. There were little moments that we lost switching off after points being scored and a key moments around dead balls, but that'll come with experience. But it's just I don't know if they'll get the chance to build, and that's what worries me. It was a platform to build off, but I don't know if they ever will.
Yeah, I'll start with the positives because there's a fair few. I agree. Second test was a lot better. I thought Cam Ben Thomas axis worked really well. I thought some lovely touches from Cam. I know, obviously, yes, he drops the ball, which leads to Jake Gordon's try, but I thought for the majority, some lovely touches in attack. The pass to Liam is really well weighted. There are a couple of lovely grubber kicks in behind. Ben Thomas likewise. Nice variation early doors. Okay, the crossfield kick didn't come off, but he was trying things. He was trying little chips over the top. He was feeding the backs. Then you talk about, I think, the biggest positive of this tour, Archie Griffin. The guy played, I think, 142 minutes. I don't think he came off in the second test, apart from his HIA. Make of that what you will as well.
And he's 3 for 3 next week on Friday as well, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, but make of that what you will on the flip side, because the positive is the guy can do it, and he showed he could do it. And actually, first test, I thought he grew into the game and got stronger as he went along. And second test, he seemed to get more into it as well. A tight head at international rugby shouldn't be playing 74 minutes. That's my other point, really, is that you should have someone to come off the bench that you've got confidence in to be able to back that up. But I spoke to Chris Horseman beforehand, and Chris Horseman was, huge amounts of praise for Archie Griffin, saying that he's going to bring physicality in defence, physicality in attack. I thought he offered both, a defence particularly, a really nice jackal, but what he's got is some really good hands for link play, something I didn't expect to see. And you would talk about, Wales have been behind on that for years. I think that's an area where you look at Ty Furlong's role with Ireland, you look at
Carl Sinclair.
Yeah, Carl Sinclair, what Stephen Moore used to do for Australia as well, back in the day, a few years back. Wales haven't had that player who could really do it. The player that used to do it for us was quite often Beard, who, if we're being frank, is probably not the best ball carrier in the world, so didn't quite work as well. But I was really impressed with Archie Griffin. And fair play to the lad when you come off the back of what was a disappointing first test, if we're being frank and open and honest about it, to do what he did in Australia. I thought, yeah, fair play to the lad, kudos. And I saw quite a bit of debate about what's going to happen with him next season. And I thought that was really interesting. And yeah, I can't think of many better places that he's going to have experience and growing and understanding the game than Bath. Like he's going to be one to watch in the future. Um, there's my ode to Archie Griffin over, and but no, I was really impressed with him in short. And then Ellis Bevan was probably the other one who came out with a lot of credit for the two tests. His kicking game, you know, is gone up tenfold this season in general. But yeah, really impressive gameplay. I think the big thing for him now going forward is how do you get the other area of his game going? I've sort of said it a little bit on this pod before, but we've seen a lot of good kicks from him, look good kicking play. Where can we get a bit more of that sniping attitude, that drawing defenders in, sucking players in, getting Rio off his wing to attack that round the fringes, or those bits of nine play that James and Gibson Park does so well, Faf de Klerk do so well. That added level. Pardon, sorry.
Thomas as well, very good for the
Yeah,
snipey thing. Sometimes not so good
exactly.
at the basic scrum play.
No, exactly, and it's getting those added elements on top. But as far as it's that, if that's your base level, you've got a blinking good line on your hands. So that's really good. The big one for me, and I've said this several times now, I just don't get the Ben Thomas Grady thing going forward. Um, if we had Matt Sherratt talking about who his positionals are, and Ben Thomas is your 12, which he's going to be next season because one, signing Callum Sheedy, two, that's what Matt Sherratt wants in a 12, is a ball playing 12, and Grady is going to be your 13/wing. How on earth are they supposed to, as young men still, learn on the job in international rugby and get the experience of doing it? I think there's too much of this learning on the job situation going on at the moment. That'd be my main criticism, but I don't quite see how that's going to work at international level. Not saying they're both not international standard players, just I don't see how they are going to play in those positions if they're not playing in those positions regionally. Um, yeah, that's. But there's so many positives, but like Dan said, it's difficult to see that continuation of a plan when, especially including with so many players up in the air of who's going to play where and that sort of thing going forwards. But yeah, I was blown away by Archie Griffin in the second test. I thought he was superb.
One other name I want to throw in, because I think he's been also one of the things, and also I feel like a bit ego inflated, because it sort of proved me right when everyone was criticizing him in previous Six Nations and stuff. Christ,
Yeah,
his work as using him as a workhorse player, not this big ball carrier everyone was expecting, it's been great, because he's just been hitting. He's hitting rucks. He's hitting people. It's great to see. There's a bit of carrying, probably still not the carrier people wanted, but now he's in that role and not the out carrier role. Quite good. 90% of his line, his jump in the line out's been quite good. I do want to say though, Ben Thomas, I thought, has acquitted himself quite well at 10. You do get a huge different dimension shift with Sam Costello when he comes on. Again, actually, someone was it Josh from Blood Mode pointed out. Actually, it seems to, or it might have been Squidge on that episode, but saying about how Costello coming off the bench is actually really good for Wales, and it gives you that transformative. It breaks open the game plan. Well, I thought Ben Thomas played quite well.
Sorry, on the Costello thing, we had Patchell on a few weeks ago, and another pod, and he was talking about the influence of coming off the bench and how much easier it is. And that's why Patchell looked so much sorry, that Costello looked perhaps better in some people's eyes in the first test, because it was go out, show some energy and throw the ball around and try and make something happen. Do you know what I mean? That's, as a 10, that's dreamland scenario, isn't it? I can only, well, I've never played that. I can only imagine.
Yeah, you have it with the nines all the time. I always like, no matter who starts at 9 for Wales, whoever comes off the bench is the person who should be starting the next week. 9 times out of 10, it's just the way things go.
The
But yeah,
Mike
it's
Phillips
those.
conundrum.
Yeah,
No matter who was off the bench compared to Mike for about 5 years after 2011, they looked like the better player. However, they weren't once they started.
yeah. Again, I think it's that just being able to flick the game plan around, and you've had a bit more time to adapt. Yeah, I thought they were quite good. Line out less so. Driving more, which some people are saying was a big learning of a singer, but I think actually we've had a decent driving maul for quite a while. The problem was just getting the ball in a position where we could maul it. I mean, last week we scored 4 tries, which is the first time in a while we've done. Oh, I was saying that, I suppose we did it
Scotland, was
a
it?
few times. Yeah, I think. I'm not sure. Did we do it in Scotland? Yeah, just about against Scotland. But someone again on Blood they're putting out like, how often does a Gatlin side score 28 points and lose?
Hmm.
So that's
It comes back to those cheap points, doesn't it? You talked
yeah.
about, the other bit, the lack of plan. Well, it's not a small thing. They call it the full set piece for a reason, but it was 6 points effectively from restarts that was conceded.
Yeah.
Both
Yeah, one was a poor timing clear out, and
the Valentini tackle on both of them. He's lucky. I'll say that. But the 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 plan from the reception of restarts was poor because the plan the previous week was poor. There was the knock on from Liam, I think, from a ball that went over the top, and there was a couple of things. But also on the flip side, the kickoffs themselves seemed to lack a real plan. At one stage, I wondered if they were just going long in the hope that Australia kicked the ball off the pitch because they knew how strong the diving maul was. But I think I've probably given them too much credit, if I'm not completely honest. I think there wasn't as clear and coherent a plan for the restarts as or even the execution, perhaps. Not that I want to dig out Ben, but the it did seem like it was a bit of a weird restarts plan. Um, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, the other point that's just jumping into the Kreisschunzer one. I completely agree, Harley, but he's another one. Where's he going to play next season? He's probably going to play 7. So I just don't get it.
well, in fairness, since he's come back from injury, Baxter has been using him as second row or that impact second row. So, and
Maybe.
also I think if you talk about, like, we're talking about with Morgan Morris about the role he plays, whether it's the Ospreys, if it's the role that Gatlin wants to say, I mean, let's be fair, he's playing 6 next weekend, on Friday. So I mean, I think as long as that, if that's the role he's playing, and actually a fantastic jackal for a man who's like 73 meters tall, like in the first test. But Dan, do you want to? I'm gonna give you the last word on the 2 tests, and then you can have the rant you've promised about Friday's game.
Well, my only last word is I agree with everything Karen said about Archie Griffin, and building on from what we said about Louis Hennessy. Basically, the entire future of Welsh rugby is in the hands of Bath. So if you if you are linked to Bath Rugby or you're a coach or something, please help us out and play Archie Griffin and Louis Hennessy as much as that helps their development over the next 2 or 3 years, and then Wales will probably win the Grand Slam. Thank you in advance.
Maybe they should be playing at the Principality. Give them some
Yeah.
experience.
Launching into Friday then. Wales are playing the Queensland Reds on Friday morning in a game which I'm sure they're all chuffed about, the Welsh lads. I'm sure they really don't just want to come home and enjoy their off season. I'm sure they really wanted to play a Super Rugby side and on a random Friday in Brisbane. Unfortunately, the game has been somewhat clouded by Warren Gatland's selection of Corey Hill to start, and specifically to give him the captaincy. It is an uncapped game, but Corey Hill, as I'm sure most people know, 3 years ago was caught up in an incident whereby he and a couple of others have gone to a house, tried to go to a house that he rents out to presumably collect money off the tenant. They've ended up going to the wrong house and sort of smashing the door and chucking bottles at the house of a single mother with her 2 very young children there, causing them to fear that somebody was breaking in or going to hurt them. police were called. It was not quite what people say, that no charges were brought. It was dealt with via a community resolution order, which is a sort of non-judicial way of dealing with an incident rather than going through the sort of traditional criminal justice process. So it wasn't the fact that he hasn't been charged with anything, it was just dealt with in a slightly different manner than is usual. The woman, female victim, subsequently noted that she felt quite pressured into doing that the police officers who had attended on the night, their demeanour changed quite noticeably when they realised that Corey Hill was indeed a Wales international rugby player, and they strongly suggested that the woman take £100 given to her by one of the men for the kids, I think was the wording used on the night. And so she launched a complaint with South Wales Police regarding their handling of the incident. At the time, Corey Hill then runs off to Japan to join the Yokohama Cannon Eagles, getting out of his Cardiff contract a year early, and now plays for the 4th Division Seacom Ruggets. I think they're third, sorry, a big promotion there. My rant is just that Corey Hill and the WRU, and I'm sending this to the organisation, not just Hill as a person, because it should come from the organisation as well. There's been no acknowledgement of this up until this week. There's been no setting out a apology from him. There's been no taking restorative steps. And people will say, what does he owe it to us? It's a private matter and stuff. But ultimately, he is playing for the national team in the sport that, maybe not by attendance or by participation numbers now, but culturally is still the national sport. And therefore, he is representing us as people and the country on the national stage, on the international stage. And that is not the type of incident we want. And I'm not saying that he should never play for Wales again. I'm sure there are some people out there who will say that, and that's up to them. Me personally, I'm saying that, people can make mistakes. This is a pretty egregious mistake, and it's not the mistake of a young man, as I think Warren Gatland tried to suggest today. He was 29 at the time, same age I am now, and I can tell you I wouldn't be going around people's houses lobbing bottles and kicking their door in, whether they owe me money or not. But it is something which he's done wrong, and if he was to come out at the start of the tour and it stated that I've done this incident, and the WRU came out with him and said, we accept that this was wrong, it's an apology for him, we've accepted that, and we think he can play, he could donate his tour fee to Women's Aid or something along those lines. I think that would be a nice gesture. I'm sure doesn't necessarily need the money I'll be on decent money in Japan over the last few years, and will have been on decent money in Wales before that. So I think there are steps that he could have made. Unfortunately, now it's all too little too late. This apology that came out in the press conference overnight, it felt half-assed. It felt just they had to do it because he's been named as captain. It's not what I want to see representing the national team. My son has just turned 1. I don't want him to have role models like that. I want him to be able to look up to lads in the international team and say, they represent themselves and their families and their countries with a bit of dignity, and they're good role models on and off the pitch. And so altogether, I just think it's a really shit time for the WRU, who are still fresh off the back of misogyny and sexism and racism allegations. We've heard nothing from WRU board on this. Abby Tierney, absolutely nothing. Gatland has not covered himself in glory at any point during these whole allegations. He's somehow always managed to be on the wrong side of comments in that regard. So yeah, I won't be watching Friday, because quite frankly, if I did, I'd just end up cheering for the Reds. I just think it's easier to pretend the game isn't happening. And it's just like I'm angry, but mostly to use a parent phrase, I'm just disappointed that the Gatland, that the WRU, and the Hill himself haven't taken any steps really to address this, and feel it's just something they can sweep under the rug with a cursory too little too late apology. So yeah, that's my tuppence on it. I think it's fairly balanced. I think people out there would go full pitchforks and call for him to never be selected again, whether he apologizes or not. I don't necessarily think that is the case, but the way that they've dealt with it is stinks, essentially.
Yeah, I think, but just because Cohen's going to shoot, so I want him to have his say. But for me, it's a case of he's apologised to Gatland, not the people, not the person who he upset. That was the thing that says to me. It's just addressing everything, and I'll get on to my big more conspiratorial thoughts in a second. But Cohen, do you want to have your say before you have to shoot?
I think I've been slightly surprised by the response from some people in closer in and around the game. The Twitter response I expected. I expected people to be annoyed. That was obviously the case, and I can fully understand Dan's point of view. I've heard responses ranging from, well, other people have done worse, and without getting too Gandhi-esque about it, that doesn't make it right. But the other thing the other thing to point out, I think I've heard as well lines like, "Oh, it wasn't him; it was his mates." Well, you need better mates. Be my immediate response to that. My general feeling about it is it's one that should have been sorted 3 years ago. The apology should have come 3 years ago. It should have been transparency. I can understand to some extent from Corey Hill's perspective that perhaps he didn't think he needed to do a formal WRU apology in the sense of he was going off to Japan, maybe didn't think he was ever going to play for Wales again, so he's got into that mindset. At the time, I know there was per the BBC reports, there was no apology from him directly to the woman involved per her statement, or her interview. I think that's something that is poor. That it should have been a direct apology. It should have been, if you're going to make an egregious mistake like that, you should be apologizing for it profusely and straight away and acting on it appropriately. Yeah, I can't agree with the Gatlin comment of a young man make mistakes. He's not a young man. He's 29. 28, 29. It's that's something that doesn't sit well with me. I don't know if I agree that it wasn't sincere. I've seen the video. It did look quite sincere, in my opinion, about apologizing. But I think the reason it probably doesn't feel sincere is the timing of it. If you're being, if it's like being made first minister or prime minister and then apologizing as you're being given the award. It seems like you're trying to cover your back before moving on to bigger and better things, and that's probably why people are frustrated about it. And I can completely understand that. I think it's the timing of the apology is the thing that frustrates me the most. But yeah, if that had come before, I think I'd have thought let bygones be bygones and be okay with it. At the same time, I do understand Dan's point. I don't think he should be captain, but I know a lot of people have voiced the opinion that of that group, he's a leader and is a good leader and will help those in terms of on the pitch playing. And there aren't that many leadership options there, I suppose, is what some other people have been saying. I'm trying to balance. I'm being a bit on the fence, but I do agree with a lot of Dan's points, but there because I have been surprised by the in rugby response that I've heard.
I'd also add that the other thing Gatlin tries to say quite a bit, and he said it before the tour and this week, is that it was dealt with by Cardiff at the time. I vehemently disagree with that, and the club are aware of that as well. Like, I think they handled it really poorly at the time. The simple fact of the matter is, it happened on, I think, a Sunday night, and he played the following Saturday, and they were aware of it before that. He didn't get punished by Cardiff. He didn't get punished by WRU. He was allowed to leave his contract early to run off to Japan and hide, and that is what happened. So I don't think he's ever actually faced any consequences from it. Cowen, you shooting?
He's going.
He's going. I don't think he's ever faced any consequences for it, actually. And that is another little element that annoys me when it's brought up as well. That it was not dealt with by anyone at the time, and it's clearly not been dealt with now. And it links in. I wrote my piece on my blog, which I put out again this week. The WRU have got unfortunate form for this because they keep picking Hannah Bluck in the women's team as well, who was convicted of domestic abuse a couple of years ago. She did receive proper criminal justice route of community service and paying fine to the victim, and appealed it, and it still got upheld. So they've never addressed that. They just keep picking her and giving her central contracts. So it's on the people as individuals, but it's also majorly on the WRU as an organization that if they want to show that they've turned a corner, then they actually have to produce some actions to follow up words. Otherwise, the words are very empty.
Yep, absolutely. My big now I'm going to give my big conspiracy spiel now. The first thing that everyone's talking about with this is the whole Corey Hill thing, which leaves very little time to talk about some of the more interesting points. Like, we've picked this is supposedly a development team, and we've picked a second row who are both in their 30s. And realistically, are they going to be the future? Right, you can talk about the leadership with Hill, fine. We don't have an out-and-out 7 in the back row. Like, I thought just give both of them. I'm surprised. Like, I can see why they rest both. Ref will put them on the bench, but I think he's just on the side. But also, it's like, what's the game plan? What is this game plan going to be? Are we going to have the third game plan in 3 games? There's no continuity. Because basically everything's changed. Junzer, who's been playing very well in the second row, has been pushed out to the back row. It's right. I think we can all agree Gatland is basically unsackable now, because the WU can't afford to get him out of his contract, and he isn't going to quit. But why is there so little scrutiny around, like, say, the assistant coaches, for example? Yes, our driving maul has been excellent, but our forwards consistently get bullied at breakdown. Our scrum is a proper lottery. And the line-out is somehow even more random chance at times. Why is that not being a thing? Like, I can see, like, looking, I've actually looked into a little bit more about Alex King. Alex King is a specialist to sort of like set piece coach. So his attack is never going to work if we can't get our set piece sorted. Which begs the question: why have we not got a bit like Jockeys did? So he's managing his attack. This is how my overall picture. I've got a specialist skills coach to improve the bits that need to be improved by players, so that it better fits. Why have we not got something equivalent? This is a national team. In theory, they spend all their money on it because they're the team that make money. Defense, actually, I do think the Mike Forshaw defense has been pretty good. I think the issue has been more we're changing personnel so often that there's no cohesion and no one knows where they are. And I think if you're not picking players used to doing certain roles, like Mason Grady's been used as that 12 shooter role. If that's not what he's been learning at club, he's still he's basically had to get his head around defending on the wing at both club and international level, then defending at 13 club and international level. Now he's having to do it at 12 as well. Come on, the lads from Barry, like as am I can only focus on about one thing at a time. Like, as anyone, if there are any old Penarthins listening and see me in pre-season training last night, I can run or I can pass the ball. I can't I can't get in my head to pass the ball until I've had at least 4 weeks of pre-season, because my brain, it's just not instinctive enough. So it's just all these little things, and it's like, why that needs to be the forefront. I mean, but of course, because he's picked Corey Hill, that is a talking point. I mean, I know we're quite hypocritical on this pod because, again, it's what we opened the discussion with.
Yeah, I can see where people like it. It does. Gatland throughout his tenure as on both tenures has often sought to deflect when criticism comes his way, and he is quite happy to take the praise and the good time of it's all him, like, bigging up these players, and then when it's not going well, it's never his fault. So I can understand where it can. And to be honest, until you were speaking then, I hadn't really looked at the full team because I'd seen that Corey Hill was captain and couldn't bother looking at the rest. But the continuity there, it's not impossible looking at the starting 15 that what's our first autumn is Australia again, isn't it? Our first autumn game, I think. That I would say probably only 2 of the starting 15 start in the positions that they are in the game against the Reds in that first test, and that's probably Winnett and Dyer in the back three, because it's very
And
likely
Dyer
that
will be left wing.
yes, he'll switch wings probably, yeah, when Adams is back. So, Griffin might keep his position, but if some of the more experienced tight heads are available, they may well come in. I think Matthias and Lloyd are unlikely to be there, barring injury crisis. Screech and Hill, again, unlikely, barring injury crisis. Shun's more likely to be starting in the second row than at blindside. Plumtree almost
More
certainly
likely to
won't
be
be a
6.
7. Yeah, there's no chance he's at 7. Mac probably doesn't start at 8 unless, again, there's injuries there. Davis and Costello could start, but I probably, if I had money to bet at the moment, I would put it on Thomas and Anscombe coming back in probably at 9 and 10 if they start the season well at Gloucester. I don't see Tompkins at 13 as a long-term thing. Eddie James, well, he didn't get a sniff in either of the tests, so I don't particularly see him, unless he has a worldly start of the season for the Scarlets, they're making it. And, well, Grace, he'll actually have to play some competitive club rugby union first. So, that is the major concern, and Gatland could keep doing that forever, really, and just constantly claim we're evolving forever and and never really build towards anything. And then in the end, just say, well, look at all these players I've developed, but they've never really gone anywhere. So, yeah, I don't know what he's up to. Maybe by this time next year we'll have a clear. But you look at the next 12 months, and he's got 3 tough autumn tests, which he could theoretically lose. Taking the losing spell into the Six Nations, which, if we're still on losing spell at the start of that Six Nations, another wooden spoon is not impossible. And then next summer it's a Lions tour, which, yes, we won't have many people on, I wouldn't have thought, but usually you do see a sort of switched up side that tours with Cymru during the Lions window, so it'd be more change
I think
again.
it's Japan as well we're going to.
Is it? No. So yeah, it's likely that he'll try and blood a few more people who've appeared over the next 12 months. And yeah, I don't know when we ever settle on a team or any sort of combinations, in particularly key areas. Back row changes so often. There's no that centre partnership doesn't look happy. That can't be the long-term option at centre. Like, Carwin was saying about Ben and Grady not playing in positions, and Cardiff are definitely not playing Grady at 12, and they're highly unlikely to play Ben at 10. So yeah, I don't know. If somebody has a crystal ball and can show what the next 12 months like, that would be great. But at this stage, I don't see how anyone can confidently say Gatland knows what he's doing. And then, yeah, it opens up more than enough evidence that he is just sort of covering his own ass constantly and trying to deflect away from what he's up to, or lack of up to.
I said I don't want to dwell too long on this. We've been chatting for quite a while, but just a couple of more points, and I just want to go very Cardiff focused now. Obviously, congratulations to all the Cardiff players and former Cardiff players, and the likes of Chris Junzer, who was a former academy. Oh god, he was a Dragons player. He was just on a slightly more permanent loan. So what do you think? What was up with Domachowski? Do you reckon? Do you think it's just it's been a fitness thing, or do you think it's because Gatlin kind of knows what to get with he's getting with Domachowski now, and he wanted to see Kemsey Mathias, but then didn't play Kemsey Mathias at all in the second test.
Yeah.
And then after that, nice to see our 2 hookers, Evan and Ethan, getting start and their first and a debut, although it won't be a cap for Evan Daniel, as this is an uncapped test match. But
yeah, the Domachowski one's odd a little bit to me. My thought initially when the teams come out, and particularly the second test, and he wasn't involved, I just thought maybe Gatland, like Matthias, he's a bit more mobile than Doma off the bench, and that he generally has picked your sort of more physical props to start, and then your more mobile guys off the bench. And Dylan Lewis has made a bit of a living, really, of coming off the bench under Gatland. But then to not bring Matthias on. Did he bring him on at all in the second test? He went full 80, Thomas, did he?
Gareth Thomas went full 80 and Archie Griffin basically
Yeah,
was all but 6 minutes.
I don't get why you wouldn't bring Matthias on at all then. So yeah, because I think
to him twice in the Six Nations as well.
Yeah, Doma and Gareth Thomas are quite. They've got similar traits. I think there's little differences here. Thomas is a bit slimmer, a bit quicker, but just in terms of both solid scrummagers, not destructive, not bad either. They'll do you a job. Both solid jackal threats. Both got good hands, and can shift the ball on. So I just thought maybe Matthias offered that point of difference, but yeah, when he didn't bring him on, I can't really explain that. That would have to, I'd be interested to hear what Gatlin said, but then again, I probably wouldn't at the same time. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Evan Lloyd. I think obviously he's got work to do on his darts, but he's still not 2 years into his conversion to hooker yet, which is important to remember. I remember watching his first game at hooker for the Rags. I think it was Henley Hawks we played in a preseason friendly from, I don't know what division they were in at the time, National 1, National 2, something around there. And I remember him coming over to his family and saying, "How was it?" And he just, I can't remember what the exact words were, but it was on the lines of, "Oh, I'm fucked from the scrums," or something like that. So he's come a long way since then, certainly. Yeah, he underthrew quite a lot in both tests. He's particularly where they call into the front, and there was a couple that they're just not hitting the top of the jumpers reach at all. They're sort of going face chest area, so he's got work to do in there. But the energy he brought off the bench in the second test, in particular, that he comes on, he chases down one kick, literally just pushes an Australian player out the way, borderline penalty, but gets away with it and dives on a loose ball. And then there's a great try saver on the Australian left winger, where he's in the line and he sees they've got an overlap and just takes off for sort of 20, 25 meters, covers across and makes the tackle as well, where the winger's trying to step back inside, which a lot of outside backs would be done by a step back inside there when they're going full pelt towards the touchline. So, he's obviously, there's obviously a Derry Lake-esque comparison there as big physical back rowers who weren't quite was they're big and physical. I don't think they've just got the sort of 6'4" physical height presence to become out and out 6/8. So they've switched up front, rather than you get some back rowers who are seen as sort of too lightweight and get put into hooker, which doesn't always work. Whereas, yeah, these guys were certainly heavy enough, but just didn't quite have the sort of athletic frame to go with it. So somebody asked me on Twitter, like, what's his sort of next few years looks like. And if he gets his throw-in right, which, it's hard to say whether he will or won't, it'll be down to sort of his ability to learn and the coaching that he gets. But if he does get that right, his ceiling's massive elsewhere around the pitch. So yeah, I think he, despite the lineup not going well, he comes back with credit from Australia. And then Evan Daniel, lots of really good raw skills. He's absolutely rapid for a hooker. He'd be one of the quickest players on the pitch probably on Friday morning. He's got a solid line out throw. He's been in the hooker a bit longer. He's not probably as strong scrummaging wise as a Lloyd or a Lake with their size, but he'll give you plenty around the field as almost like a kind of like a 12 almost, the way that he runs and the speed that he goes with. So pleased for him to get an opportunity to show what he can do. And Cardiff's hooking stocks are looking really good next season. Sherratt, I think he'll rotate a bit more. With Belcher started a lot of games this year, but I think
and played a lot of minutes as well.
Yeah, I think we'll see him drop to the bench a couple of times more next season, which isn't a bad thing. We've got a bit more experience now there. So if you have, an Ed Byrne and a Josh McAnally starting, then to bring on Liam Belcher and his leadership in the last 20, 30 minutes and his pace and, his ability in the wider channels later in the game is certainly not a bad thing, as well as his line out throw-in. So yeah, good choices for Sherratt, good headaches to have, but he's shown that he uses his players quite wisely in that regard as well.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I think we're quite looking forward to it. As for upcoming pods, I think we're still trying to get some more guests in for you before we get to pre-season when we'll sort of probably preview the pre-season games. I don't know if we'll necessarily do some reviews. Also, coming up towards the start of the new season, we're going to have Lynn back on the pod from President of Safety Interest, along with David Allen, the supporters representative of the board. We're going to do a sort of Q&A, just so we'll put out some feelers of questions there, just more about supporters and what we as fans want to see at CAP over the next few years. Things like facilities, whilst they're looking at trying to sort of maintain that, as Richard was talking about the other week, that sort of process of keeping the renovations taken over until we can look into the big refurb. Unless you've got anything else to say, Dan?
No, all good for me, Tap.
In that case, then, thank you all very much for listening. Thank you to Carwyn. Sorry I had to pop off some work stuff earlier, and thank you, Dan, for joining me.
Cheers.
Everyone have a good weekend. Ta-ra.
Thank you for listening to the Cardiff Central podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe, rate and review wherever you listen to us, as it really helps spread the word. You can find us on all the usual social media channels or email us on welshregionalrugbypod@gmail.com. And remember, whatever the question is, rugby is always the answer.
Sports Social Podcast Network.